This is episode 7 with Diana Fitz.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey, what's up, Quarter Lifers? Welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 7 today, and I cannot believe we are in Q2 for 2016. I've got some cool projects lined up, but I'll let you know more about those as the year progresses. As for today's show, I want you to take a second and answer this question. So, have you ever had this moment where you suddenly realize that all the goals and dreams that you once set for yourself might not be achieved, that they might not come true? It's pretty scary, right? Well, that's what happened to today's guest, Diana. Having always wanted to be a writer, Diana realized that at 25, she still hadn't taken any action towards her dream. That's when she decided that instead of just beating herself up about it or worrying about it, she decided to change things up for herself. Fast forward to today, and Diana now has 2 books to her name, and she helps others in their 20s balance their commitments, stay focused on the task at hand, and set and achieve their goals. In today's show, you'll learn where to draw the line between wanting more and feeling ungrateful for what we already have, how to balance a ton of commitments, the lights at the end of the tunnel strategy for beating procrastination, how to design an environment that allows you to focus, 3 common mistakes people make when trying to focus on a task, and how to deal with the what now feeling after achieving your goals. As usual, you can find all the show notes and links that we mention in the episode at briantier.com/007. But for now, let's go hang out with Diana. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm speaking to Diana Fitz. Diana, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So, Diana, we connected via Twitter, and I was immediately interested in your story after we chatted for a bit. So I was wondering if you could take us through your quarter life years and just let everybody get a better idea of what those looked like for you and what you went through at that stage.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm proud to say that I think I'm still in my quarter life crisis, but it has been a really enjoyable experience, actually. I think some of the best years of my life so far. It's really been motivating for me. I currently am in graduate school, getting my master's degree in occupational therapy, working part-time and trying to maintain a life and figure out what I'm doing next. And so about a couple of years ago, as I was doing this, I envisioned what my life would look like in the future, and I was like, yeah, I'm happy with that. That's going to be okay. That's great. And to me in my head, I said, that sounds a lot like settling. And I don't know if I'm okay with settling. I'm very lucky to have access to an education and to means of supporting myself. And, I'm very grateful for those things. But I felt like there was more I could be doing. And as I was approaching 25, I started thinking, well, ever since I could remember, I wanted to be a writer. And here am at 25, and I still haven't done that yet. And why hasn't that happened? And how can I really call myself as an aspiring writer and not have actually taken action on that? So, I decided I didn't want to settle for a 9-to-5 job. I didn't want to hit 25 and say that I didn't fulfill my, childhood dreams of becoming a writer. So I decided it was time to take action on that. And I panicked for a little while, and that panic turned into motivation. So that's when I started writing Your Focus Formula, which is a lot about productivity and staying focused. And I really wrote about the strategies I was using to get, to write a book while full-time grad school, working a job, training for a marathon, and trying to balance the rest of my life. So that was really just what do I know the most about? What am I currently struggling with? Let me write that and see if I can help others that are in that same place. And it's really grown from there. What started as kind of a bucket list of like, gosh, I just need to get this done by 25 because otherwise I'm letting my childhood self down, to, wow, I can really change what my life is going to be. I don't need to settle. I can make my life exactly what I want it to be. I just need to, work a little bit harder, which has been really fun. So I've really enjoyed it. It's been quite a surprise to me, what kind of how I could reshape the idea of crisis into something really, really meaningful for my life. So.
Oh man, that's so awesome. Something that came up for me that I want to touch on is so right in the beginning you spoke about a vision and realizing you didn't want to settle, and I definitely experienced that myself, and I think a lot of people listening will probably relate to that. But then think, like, where do we draw the line between, or distinguish between, wanting more and feeling ungrateful for what we already have?
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important. And I've noticed this a lot in a lot of my friends that are going through similar quarter life crisis type moments. Because I noticed that when I mention quarter life crisis to maybe someone older or someone who's not experiencing it, they tend to laugh. And think it's a joke. And in my head, I'm like, we just called it a crisis. I don't know why we're laughing about a crisis, but it I think because the quarter life crisis kind of manifests itself as success, and a lot of the people that are struggling with these things are, have jobs and are pursuing things that on the surface anyone would be really grateful to have. And so I think there's a lot of guilt that comes with not being grateful for those things. And I don't think wanting more implies ungratefulness. And that's something that I really have struggled with. I think there is a fine line between, yeah, I'm going to push for more, but I'm not going to, take other people down while I'm doing it, or I'm not going to not be appreciative of what I already have. And I think there's something too about using your efforts to help others too. So when I started working on my projects, I thought, yeah, I could write something that I enjoy, and I could write something that means something to me. But I think what would be most beneficial is if I write something that would be of use to others. And so that's kind of how I justified it, and helped myself not feel guilty about it, because I did have a good life going for me. And to feel like I was in this place of wanting more, it was really helpful to know that by striving for more, I would be also helping others. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So were you working a typical 9 to 5 when you had this realization?
No, so I was in full-time graduate school. So my classes were basically 9 to 5, and then I had a part-time job at my university that was often nights and mornings. It was a live-in position, so that was often the other hours of the day. So yeah, I would generally wake up pretty early, go for a run, write for about an hour, go to class till 5, and then do my job until about 10 p.m. and then start all over the next day. So I got into a pretty strict routine and schedule, which was something that was really helpful, and that allowed it to just kind of happen naturally, and I didn't have to spend a lot of time analyzing when I was going to get things done. And it was really nice to feel like I had done something for myself, for my future, before 8 a.m. So it was nice to have gotten in an hour of writing before I'd even started my day. That was always really nice.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of morning routines and that sort of thing. But this kind of leads to the next thing I wanted to ask you. So you've had this kind of realization now that there's a lot of things you still wanted to do. And how did you, like, once you decided that, how did you go about balancing it all? Because I mean, you launched a business and trained for a marathon, and you were studying full time, and you're at grad school and a side job. Like, how did you balance all of those things?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with scheduling and being very meticulous about scheduling. I use Google Calendar very quite a lot.
Yeah.
I think, and also another thing was just I became very focused in how I used my time. So one of my favorite strategies in that I use almost every day helps me eliminate procrastination, and that's just the light at the end of the tunnel strategy and using visualization to realize like what I'm working for and what I will gain by finishing a current task. So I basically when I started taking on these things, all of the time that I was using to procrastinate just kind of fell away because I was so driven by this vision of what my life could be like if I succeeded. So in the short term, that would be like, okay, so I'm working on an assignment I'd rather not be working on. I'd rather watch a YouTube video. But then I'd be like, well, in an hour, I could either still be trying to finish this assignment or I could have just finished it because I didn't procrastinate and be off doing the rest of my day. And that was something that was really beneficial. And then in the longer scheme, I would think about, okay, if I focus and get an hour work of writing done, maybe in 20 years, I'll be living the life that I want to be living instead of, having spent all this time watching YouTube videos. So, I think that was what was really important. I became a lot more intentional about how I used my time through scheduling. And then I also there was no reason for me to procrastinate. Like my dreams were just so streamlined at that point. What I wanted was so streamlined and my time was so limited that there was procrastination just kind of fell away, which was really helpful. So that's kind of how I balanced it. And there was some sacrificing that needed to happen in that too. I had to give up, I couldn't go to every single party that I was invited to, and I couldn't, watch every television show that I used to. But, I think there are still room for those things, and I managed to still include those. But I think it's figuring out what's most important to you and then making time for those things. Because there is enough time. I'm a big believer in that there is enough time. One thing I talk about in one of my books is that even if you schedule it all, we tend to overestimate how much time it takes to complete a certain task. But if you actually calculate the number of hours we have in a week, even the most busy person has about 19 free hours a week that they could be allocating however they would like to. And 19 hours a week is enough to, start a business or pursue a side project. So totally. Once I did the math, it helped my brain make sense of the fact that it was possible. And it was. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned your books. I want to talk about them. Let's start with the first one, your focus formula. Is this where you're sharing what you've learned about productivity and how you manage to balance all those things? What does the book get into?
Yeah, that one's really about how to best design an environment, a mindset, a lifestyle that allows you to focus. Because there's so many things that come into focus. It could be that you are listening to the wrong music. We associate certain types of music with certain activities, and it's not going to be helpful to listen to a really energetic workout playlist while trying to get some serious writing done. So, sometimes there can be accidental things that disrupt our focus. And sometimes there's other things that we need to manufacture. So we don't realize that we're making excuses or that we're actually part of the reason why we aren't moving forward in a goal is because it's the wrong goal. And so a lot of the book, I tried to make it very actionable because I got really tired of reading personal development books that talked a lot about certain concepts, but then didn't help readers take the next step. I felt like I was always getting trapped in, the philosophy and the theory and had no idea how to actually use it. So there's a lot of diagrams and exercises to kind of really help make it actionable for your specific circumstance, because everyone's circumstances are different. Some people really can focus to electronic dance music, and some people really need classical music. So it's really, there's not one answer for any one person. And so I tried to write it based on everyone's unique circumstances. But yeah, it is really based on what I was using at the time to help me focus and get everything that I needed and wanted to do done. And to do so in a way that I enjoyed. There's a lot of strategies in here about, how do we increase our motivation without becoming anxious about it? So I think there's a really fine line between being motivated and being anxious about achieving goals. And so I think that takes a lot of awareness, but also just some careful planning. And so there's steps in there about, what is this task you're trying to get done? Are you leaving yourself enough time for it? How do you need to structure it so that it's actually making you happier? Because I don't really see the point in being productive and striving towards a goal if in the end, you're not happy about it. The point of goals is to, create a life that we enjoy and we are proud of, and anxiety doesn't do that. So.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that in a sec. I just wanted to ask, what are sort of let's say 3 common mistakes you notice people make when trying to focus on a task at hand?
Yeah, one of the most common ones is that focus implies uninterrupted, complete attention on a task for long periods of time. And that has been scientifically proven to not be the most effective way in which to complete a task. So there's a technique called the Pomodoro Technique. It's become pretty famous now. And that includes working on a task for 25 minutes, taking a 5-minute break, working for another 25 minutes, 5-minute break, for as long as needed to complete a task. And what that does is it allows the brain to realize that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and that there's a reward coming. So, you can let yourself do whatever you want in that 5 minutes. That's your brain's time to turn off, do whatever it needs to do. So it's a lot easier to focus for 25 minutes. And 25 minutes is such a short amount of time that it's kind of easy to trick yourself into being super productive in that amount of time. So I think part of the problems with focus is we sit down and we say, okay, I'm going to focus for 4 hours straight, and I'm not going to check my email once. And then, within 10 minutes, we are bored and not paying attention. So I think cutting ourselves some slack when it comes to the amount of time in which our focus is able to sustain itself. I think that is one of the biggest myths around focus. I think a second one is that we often don't relate a task to the bigger picture of our goals or our lives. So even something as simple as going grocery shopping can relate to a larger story of what you want for your life. So say, for example, I have a family and I know that I have to go to the grocery store, but I just can't get myself out the door, and I'm, just putting around my house doing other things. Going to the grocery store is really important for my personal values in regards to being able to provide for my family and creating home cooked meals that make them healthy and happy and spending time with them at the dinner table. And it can relate back to my bigger goal of creating a family life that I enjoy. And I think that is useful from anything from completing our taxes to, doing our school assignments. How does that one little task relate to the bigger picture? Because I think it's really easy to get tunnel vision in regards to, I'm so bored right now in this moment. Not everything we do is really meaningful, even if the overall goal is meaningful. But how can we link our meaningful goals back to the mundane tasks that are sometimes required to be successful? So I think those are some of the biggest hiccups I see in regards to maintaining focus.
Cool. And yeah, I love the Pomodoro technique. I've experimented with different sort of work and rest breaks. I did 25-5 for a while, but I found it a little bit too short. So at the moment I'm doing 50-10, which is still great because every hour I'm getting up and moving and stretching my legs, filling up my water bottle. I think especially when you're running a laptop-based business, it can be easy to sit at your laptop for 6 hours in a row and not move around, and next thing you realize, it's like the whole day has gone by and you've just been sitting at a desk. So yeah, I think it's about like experimenting with sort of a ratio that works for you, but definitely getting up and moving regularly.
Yeah, and sometimes it depends on the task, because if sometimes 25/5 will work if you're trying to complete forms or file papers, but yeah, 50/10 might work if you're trying to write an essay or you're in flow state for some kind of other thing. So sometimes it can depend from person to person, but then also from task to task too.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Cool. Now, we mentioned goal setting and working towards a bigger vision. I know from experience this has happened to me, and for people listening, I'm sure they've experienced it too. But is it just about setting a goal and going for it full speed, or does it go further than that? The reason I ask is, often we achieve something that we set out to achieve, and then you get this feeling like, is that it? Is that what I wanted to feel like? And it's almost like an anticlimax. So how do we deal with those feelings that can pop up?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem and something I'm seeing a lot in people our age. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is turning goals into habits. And Gretchen Rubin writes amazing things about habits and how to create meaningful habits. So she's definitely someone to look into if you are interested in this. But I think the difference between having a goal and a habit is that a goal is a one-time thing. I'm very focused on achieving this one thing. It's going to be amazing. And then you achieve it, and then it's like starting back at zero. And maybe it's not. Actually, it's just that it feels that way because, we haven't done the planning to make it a sustainable part of our lives. And so the nice thing about habits is that they are more linked to our values and our daily experiences. So one thing I like to talk about is if I have a goal of running a marathon, I'm going to say, yeah, I run 26.2 miles. And that's a goal, as opposed to a habit might be something like I'm a runner. I like to run. It says more about who I am and my identity. And I think that's something that's easier to sustain over the long term because it starts to shape a picture of our life story and of who we actually are. Because I think it's really easy to compile all these goals and achieve these things and not realize how they all fit together. Where it's a lot easier is like once we develop a habit and we say, yeah, I've have all these running goals, but I have been running for X number of years and it's been a part of my life for this amount of time. It makes a lot more sense to then have, there's somewhere to go once I achieve a goal in relation to running. It's not like I'm just suddenly going to ditch running and not know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I think that pertains to jobs. I think sometimes if we want a promotion, we focus so hard on that promotion and we say, I'm going to, arrive to work early every day and I'm going to work on this project until it's perfect. And we're burnt out by the time we get that promotion. And it's also something external to us. That promotion is external. Whereas if we said, no, this is how I live my life. I live my life, being early to my commitments and doing the best that I can. This is something that's a part of me. That's a lot easier to then carry on with. So I think it's really important to not see goals as some kind of one-time external thing, but then before setting that goal, think about how am I going to make this a sustainable part of my life? And if there's no desire to make it a sustainable part of your life, then maybe you shouldn't be setting that goal in the first place. Because really goals are meant to lead to bigger, better things that shape an entire life story. So.
Yeah, I often love to tell clients that I'm working with that, rather than focus on the product, just focus on the process instead. And keep breaking it down. Like, what do I need to do next? What's the next small step? And like most often the product comes as a result without really focusing on it. Exactly. It's just that we don't like to think like that because it's an unsexy way of thinking of it, like doing the small things. But yeah, those all add up. And It's just a far more sustainable way to approach it. So is that what you cover in What Next, your second book?
Yeah, that's a lot more so about, okay, we're setting all these one-time goals. How do we enjoy achieving those goals, and how do we make them a bigger part of our lives? So yeah, it's kind of, how do you get over that barrier of society's telling us that we need to achieve everything, and how do we make it sustainable?
So for people listening, could you give us some tips for setting better goals, or a better way of going about goal setting? And
yeah, so one of my favorite techniques is keeping a daily accomplishments journal. I think in regards to setting goals, we sometimes can lose track of what our own skills are versus what we want and what society wants from us. And it becomes very confusing to discern what we're bringing to the table versus what society wants us to bring to the table. And so one of my favorite techniques is keeping a daily accomplishments journal. And what this does is, not only does it help pinpoint and keep track of how small little things eventually lead to bigger success, but it also kind of provides a way of keeping track of evidence of your skills, and kind of integrating parts of your life and realizing that we don't need to segregate life, work, family, athletics. We don't need to segregate the parts of our lives. So an example I use in the book is, someone's been keeping an accomplishments journal. They have always wanted to be a part of a theater production for their community, but they believe that they don't have any skills in theater, that they could never get up in front of a number of people and perform. But they've been keeping an accomplishments journal. And so they look back on it and they realize that in their job, they've given a presentation to a room full of executives, that they've had to propose a new project to all of their coworkers, and that in fact they have overcome their fear of stage fright. It was just in a different medium, and they weren't connecting the dots in that way. So I think that's a really neat way to set a goal, because not only does that give confidence in, okay, this might be something that is doable, I think it also helps us set goals that are possibly more realistic. And I've also, someone read the book and wrote to me and said that they did this for a friend that was in a quarter life crisis, and that they were having a hard time knowing what to do next in their lives. And so this person wrote their friend an accomplishment journal of all the things that they believed they had accomplished. And it kind of gave them perspective on the next step. So that's one of my favorite techniques. It's a little less tangible in regards to what goal to set, but more so in regards to gaining perspective on where you've been, and what the logical next step might be. So it's one of my favorites.
I love that idea of the friend setting the accomplishments journal. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Right. So Diana, you've obviously written 2 books yourself, and we'll link to those in the show notes. What are some of the other best books you would recommend for people in their quarter life stage of life?
Yeah, my favorite book of all time at this moment is called The Upside of Stress. And I think it's by Kelly McGonigal.
Yeah, I love Kelly McGonigal.
Oh, she's amazing. And this book really changed my world and my perspective. I probably need to credit a good number of, of my success to her. She really talks about how stress is a motivator, and how if we reframe the way we think about stress, that it can be used to drive our projects and drive our success. And it really just kind of lit a fire in me. And I stopped feeling so anxious about my stress. It was kind of like a switch was flipped when I read her work about it. And she's also one of those writers that does a really good job of making it actionable. So she'll talk about the science behind stress and how it can be beneficial to someone, and then she'll say how you can do it yourself in your own life. And so it's stuff that I've been using with people I know, and it's been really beneficial not only to me but to other people. So I think for anyone that's feeling really stressed out about their crisis, it's a pretty powerful book. So The Upside of Stress is definitely my biggest recommendation.
Yeah, she's actually, I've actually got her on a sort of a dream list of people I'd love to interview. So, Kelly, if you're listening, I'm coming for you. But I think I saw a bit of research that came out of that book, which was,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was like stress is only a negative thing if we perceive it to be a negative thing, but it can be a positive energy source if that's how we see it.
Yeah, definitely. And they've done scientific research on it. So, if you're
Yeah.
the type of person that needs to have the science to back something up, then this is the book for you, because it's pretty crazy what the science is saying about how perceptions of stress can really impact biology and how we react to it. So it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, I'll link to that in the show notes too. Diana, I want to be mindful of the time. Before I do get on to the final question, how can people find out more about you and the work you're doing and get hold of you and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so dianafits.com is probably the best place to connect with me. There's a free goal setting guide. It kind of takes someone through the steps of how to set a goal that is meaningful in their lives and kind of makes sense. So it's pretty short. It's pretty actionable. Tried to keep it pretty concise. When you grab that, you'll be on my mailing list, which I also try to deliver a lot of content through that. It's not very salesy. So dianafits.com is a great place to check that out. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and then all my stuff is on Amazon. So that's also a good place to find me.
Cool. We'll link to all of that in the show notes. Just before I get to the final question, I just want to acknowledge you for recognizing what you really wanted in life and for going for it full speed and balancing all these different things in order to create a life you could actually be proud of and that was meaningful to you. And so thank you so much for that and inspiring in that way, and for sharing your message via your books and the other work you are doing. The final question that I do have is, what one action can listeners take this week to start creating their quarter life comeback?
Yeah, so this one is pretty small, but has had a big impact on my life. I started listening to my podcast at double speed when I became serious about running. And so, I would be out running for an hour. And when I listened to my podcast at double speed, I was getting through so much more content. And I can actually thank podcasts like yours, really, for a lot of the success that I've had. A lot of the motivation, a lot of the knowledge about how to actually make it as an entrepreneur, I've learned through podcasts. So I am eternally grateful for podcasting, and probably can, in 30 years, we'll be thanking them for, the life that I hopefully will have created for myself by then. So, it sounds weird and it sounds not very useful and it sounds a little crazy, but, just turning up the speed on a podcast can actually have a really big impact on the amount of content you're able to consume in a day. And in regards to focus, it's actually really beneficial for focusing, because we don't realize that people can talk really slowly, which is fine, but it leaves our brains more space and time to get distracted. I noticed that when I turned up the speed on my podcast, that I didn't have time to get distracted. So I was actually focusing a lot more on what was being said in the podcast. So I was actually retaining a lot more content as well. So that's something that's really jump-started my learning and kind of given me a way to shape what I want my future life to be. So it's a small tip, but it's had a big impact on my life.
Yeah, I love it. And I can definitely agree. I do the exact same thing. And, a lot of people say, well, I don't have time to listen to podcasts. But if you play them on double speed, often it's like 20 minutes or even less. So yeah. I think that is a great tip, no matter how small it is. Diana, thank you so much again. This has been a really awesome episode. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I love your work.
Thank you. Well, likewise. It's an honor to be here.
Cool. Thanks again, Diana. Bye.
Bye.
There you have it, guys. Super cool interview with Diana, and I'd love to hear from you. What big goals and and dreams are you working on and you're going to take action on right now as a result of this show? Shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier and let me know. And if you enjoyed this show, I'd love for you to share it with your friends via social media. If you haven't already done so, I'd love for you to leave a review and rating for the show on iTunes. You can find that at bryantier.com/iTunes. That's BRYANTEARE.com/iTunes. And if you're really loving the show, you can become a patron at bryantier.com/support. Just a reminder again, all the links and resources we mentioned in the episode can be found at bryantier.com/007. And until next week, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting bryantier.com.